Hello and welcome to another episode of Graham Hughes' PUBCAST. Today I'm joined by Paul Somerville. Hi Paul.
Hiya.
And today we're going to be discussing Cumgate, as it's become called, which is about this guy called Dominic Cummings, who went to school here. Well, he grew up here in Durham, where I am at the moment. He went to Durham School, which is a public school, a private school here in Durham. And then he rose through the ranks of government without actually ever getting elected at any point in his life, and now he is basically running the country into the ground. So, Paul, how do you feel about Dominic Cummings?
As an individual, first of all, I'm gutted that he's from like 2 miles down the road from me. Like,
is that embarrassing?
When he was describing the proximity he is to Durham Hospital is actually exactly the same as where I'm at. So he must live literally in the very close proximity as where I'm isolating at the moment.
Oh, his parents live, I think it's 8 minutes drive down the road. I come out my house, turn left, keep going, and I get to his farm. His giant farm in the middle of nowhere, which is actually dead close to Durham city centre. Fact fans.
Apparently his father used to run nightclubs, and we've got a few mutual friends in Durham.
Oh, wow.
Mm.
I didn't know Durham had any nightclubs. I didn't know they had a night.
It doesn't anymore. So anyway, what was I going to say? Cummings, him as an individual, obviously he's good at what he does. What he's done to the British politics in terms of the way he's managed to poison the mentality of half the country and brought us to almost the brink of it's probably as close to civil war as we probably could have got without actually it happening. You know, a politician got shot in the head. Like, what's the next step?
You're talking about Joe Cox there, aren't you? Because he was the Svengali behind the Vote Leave campaign. He was the guy who came up with the bus with the big lie on the side of it. He came up with the take back control idea to say, and the dog whistle immigration stuff about the stretched public services. And if only these foreigners would stop coming over and working for the stretched public services, we'd be so much better off.
Yeah. And of course, even just that notion, and I don't want to make this about Brexit, because I've been shocked when we're discussing this pandemic and obviously the poor response, how the Brexiteers have just been quick. But Brexit, and I'm like, even better, Jeremy Corbyn.
Yes. Do you know what though? But if someone else was in charge, they would have done a worse job. Well, we don't know that, and who cares? It's just a hypothetical. Who cares? The people who are in charge right now are doing a terrible, terrible job. Objectively, one of the worst jobs in the world.
Yeah, who else would have done a better job? You know, we'll never know. Well, yes, we do. We have freedom of reference of like the entire planet, other than us in America, as a freedom of reference.
The entire planet.
Like, you know, the old game when they pick a country and you just throw a dart at the map. It's a bit like that. You go, right, boom, they've done better.
Yeah. How embarrassing. So yesterday, after, because we'd defeated COVID-19, about the same number of people died yesterday as have died in Greece since the beginning of the pandemic.
At the minute, obviously, my business is travel based, and we do various stuff with influencers, and we do a luxury bootcamp brand, and we're looking at other locations of where we could possibly do this, where it's not going to get cancelled. And I was looking, and for example, Portugal have had total, including the care home deaths that they now clearly have been undercounting.
Yeah,
Portugal has probably had less deaths in total than we had on any one day in April or March. I think they're at 1,200.
Yeah.
Bear in mind, we hit 998 at one point, and that was without the all sources figure that just started to creep up.
But this is the thing. I mean, we're going to bring this full circle back to Dominic Cummings here, because obviously this is where COVID-19 and Dominic Cummings kind of collide into each other. But let's go back a little bit further. We'll talk about Dominic Cummings. So he was the guy behind the Vote Leave campaign. He before then he worked at the Department of Education with Michael Gove, who's horrible. And he's a massive cokehead. He's always off his head on cocaine. There's footage of him in the House of Parliament, in the Commons chamber, and he's not making the normal body movements that you would if you were not on cocaine or weren't having a stroke, and he wasn't having a stroke. Anyway, so he went on to the Vote Leave campaign. He stayed in the Boris camp, the Boris Johnson camp, and eventually, once Theresa May just expired, went back to her tomb, wherever she lives at night, and Boris Johnson came bounding in, cross between Flashman and Billy Bunter, and he and basically Dominic Cummings was the genius behind all of the Boris Johnson's nonsense over the summer about getting rid of 21 Tory MPs, withdrawing the whip from them, including Winston Churchill's grandson, including the father of the House, Ken Clarke, the Chancellor. Hammond, he went from being the Chancellor of the Exchequer to being deselected by his local party within 2 months for defying Johnson. So they rule the him and Cummings. They rule the Conservative Party with an iron fist, as we've seen. Anyway, so this trucked along. We had the December election, which I still contest that Labour lost rather than the Conservatives won, on the basis that the Tories only got another 300,000 votes, whereas Labour lost 2.5 million votes, which is quite careless. Down the back of the couch. And then this brings us up to February, when Dominic Cummings, this unelected bureaucrat, God, imagine if he was in the EU. Imagine if he was a European unelected bureaucrat. Anyway, this European bureaucrat, he's on the SAGE committees. He's attending meetings of the Scientific Advisory Committee. And the thing is, Paul, this guy, he's a eugenicist. You know that? He's quite into sort of, bit of sterilisation, bit of, don't let that one breed.
I've read that there's been articles wrote by him and expressing views like that. I've never actually went in depth with them myself, but I can well believe it. There's definitely sort of obviously the model of propaganda he takes sort of definitely irks back to the sort of Mein Kampf, simple messages, repeat them often, that sort of vibe, and obviously when the whole Dr. Death eugenics comes into it at some point. And it's always the funny looking ones that want to do it as well. You think
it is the Mekons of the world.
You what?
The Mekons of the world. He looks like one of the aliens from Mars Attacks.
It's always a bit like, you would probably be the bottom of the pile here, mate. I wouldn't be. This is not a fight that you want to be picking. Not you.
I left my hat. on the train a couple of months ago. I don't have a hat anymore. So pissed off. Anyway, let's get back to Cummings. Cumgate. So, people keep asking me what I think Boris Johnson has got on. What Cummings has got on Boris Johnson. To which my reply is always "come." That explains the hair.
Yeah, I like, because there was that whole rumor about that happening with the Spectator, and we can't sack them because of this and that. And I don't believe that holds any water. I think that there is no scandal. And this is the problem, that we've got a government that is beyond shame, beyond accountability, beyond reprimand. Like, you can't look at this. This is I've seen people from the right, Brexiteers, Tories, all today, people who never comment on politics at all, coming out and going, "This is a disgrace. How is this being allowed to happen?" And they are shameless, and they're going, we're digging our heels in. And that to me, given the media control of, the government control of the media, it's almost state-owned. The fact that the tabloids trot out whatever, fair enough, we have seen a bit of a U-turn today with the Daily Mail, but the trot out almost whatever they're told.
When the Daily Mail and the Guardian are running on the same editorial, you kind of thinking, dogs and cats living together, the apocalypse. What's going on? The world's upside down.
I'm agreeing with Piers Morgan.
Piers Morgan. And Julia Hartley-Brewer, who suddenly decided to, come good at the end. I was only pretending to be evil. I'm actually a good person at heart. Who would have thought it? Oh my God. But let's talk about what he did. Let's do the autopsy afterwards. Let's talk. What did this guy do? Right? Because as far as I'm concerned, there are reports that he stalled the scientific advice, or the action on the scientific advice, which was to lock down a lot earlier than we did. We know that if we had locked down earlier, then a lot of lives, and we're talking tens of thousands of lives, could have been saved. However, that is stuff that's been reported. I want to talk today just about what Dominic Cummings said today. What is it? It's the 25th of May today? 25th of May? I want to talk about what he said in the Rose Garden of 10 Downing Street today, what he admitted, because it is quite subjectively bonkers. I just don't know where to start with it. So, did you watch it? Did you watch it all? Did you listen to it?
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, I got there's just so much waffle. I think it was intentionally long. I think he did that to so a lot of people would just trail off and go, all right, fair enough. Sounds pretty feasible.
Okay, well, I'll just go over the facts, okay? As he said, okay? He thought his wife had COVID-19.
Yeah.
He started feeling a bit worse, so he went. Well, I didn't get to see. He went home to see his wife, and then he thought, "Oh, you got COVID-19," and then he went back to work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so straight away.
Okay, so there you go. That's strike one. And then he went back home, and then he went, right, everyone get in the car. We're driving for 5 hours up to Durham, where my parents live.
Yeah, wind the windows down and don't look at each other. Doesn't count if you don't look at each other.
This is in March, so it's cold, so we can presume that the windows were not wound down. But even if they were, they put a 4-year-old child in a metal box, a car, in close proximity to 2 adults. One was definitely had COVID-19 and the other one probably had COVID-19. He did, as he admitted. And they drove up to Durham. Why? Because they didn't have any friends in London. These are millionaires. His wife's family own castles, for Christ's sake. They didn't have anyone in London they could call on. I'm sorry, if it was a single mum living in Brixton or living in Toxteth, then I could understand it. I'd get my head around that. Yeah, you've got nowhere to go. Okay.
Are you telling me that the people who are running Number 10, an organisation that fought the KGB and literally have access to MI5 and actual secret agents, cannot find a fucking babysitter in all of London?
Oh no, but he was concerned. He was concerned because people were threatening him. Okay, so people are threatening you. Did you file a report with the police? Did you get the Secret Service?
So that's the thing. So did you? And again, you don't get the true picture from listening to these little statements. You get the true picture from the commentary from people like the Alistair Campbells. So did you see his commentary afterwards? So apparently, and again, this is when like you can get someone with experience to cross-examine and shred them. So Alistair Campbell straight away afterwards said, that's a load of rubbish. So that apparently there's something called the not central commission, but there's like a central force that basically deals with security for politicians, right? So basically you ring them up and they warn you of any risks and they make sure you're safe. Because obviously, like, you know, people like Jeremy Corbyn, like when there's cameras outside the house, you know, you've got like 26 million nutters in the country. Do you know what I mean? They could just turn up at his door. So of course, that
52%. Yeah.
You just can't have people living in terrace houses in London without any form of protection. So,
okay. Well,
and apparently, Alistair checked with this sort of central force. And he says there was no reports made. There was no concerns, information requested. No request for extra security. And also the other thing, ridiculous. So you've got an employer. This employer also happens to be the Prime Minister of England, and your job happens to be running the country. You disappear for how long?
2 weeks.
2 weeks, right? At no point does anyone go, what time you going to be in? Can you meet us at such and such? Not once, and you have to go. Sorry.
He said,
miles,
did you tell the Prime Minister? And he went, oh, he's a very busy man.
But he's a very busy man, but I was ringing him in bed.
And there was a bit where he said we were in bed, which made me giggle. But let's just talk
bit of a Bert and Ernie moment.
Bert and Ernie. So here you go. Right. Let's just try and stick, as we are, right, to what Dominic Cummings admitted to this afternoon, which he reckons isn't a big deal. It's what anyone would have done. Anyone with just some common sense. You know, like there's people in Grenfell in the fire in the middle of the night, and they should have used their common sense, and then they'll still be alive. If you would use your common sense,
it's now.
You could use your instincts, and you could have gone to your father's funeral, as you know, the number of people who made these huge sacrifices. But this is what gets me, Paul. This guy got in a car and brought a virus, the most deadly virus that has been unleashed on this island for over 100 years. And he brought it in a car to Durham. And that should be a criminal offence, because it wasn't inadvertently, and this is why the stay home message was so strong. It was like, look, you might have it for a week and you won't know, and you'll be contagious. People can catch it off you. So please stay home. It wasn't like he didn't know. He was specifically, oh shit, we've got COVID-19. Let's get in the car and travel to another part of the country, hundreds of miles away. 5-hour car journey. And I tell you, after that happened, we had a massive spike in COVID-19 infections in Durham. The 5th highest in the country at one point, out of all the counties.
People going, oh, but there's been plenty of people flouting the rules. I think, yeah, but you cannot compare the chief government advisor, the man that's arguably calling the shots, to someone who went down the beach. Like, you can't. Like, you're held to a higher level of accountability when you're the one making the shots. I'm sorry.
And here's some more weirdness. First of all, he wanted help with childcare from his parents, and everyone, well, that's against the rules. And then it was his sister. He had to go, and that was against the rules. So or it was my 17-year-old niece. So you're exposing your 17-year-old niece possibly to COVID-19, the most deadly virus in the world right now.
Have you seen this one and I'm unsure, he didn't mention it, as I understand it, in the press briefing, but I've seen a load of the right-wingers share, oh, well, his son was autistic. He's got an autistic son. Have you seen this one? Oh, has he?
Oh, right. Well, my partner's deaf, so can we go and visit our families in Liverpool?
Yeah. But I think the point is, has he? Because if not, that's just another example of people just making up facts to have an excuse.
Yeah, but even if he is autistic, everyone else in this whole goddamn country who has a child who is autistic, and we're talking about thousands of families here, just had to make do with the situation. A lot of single parents had to look after their autistic child while they were suffering from COVID-19. They were told to stay at home. Got symptoms, ring up 101, stay at home. Unless it gets really bad, and then we'll take you to the hospital. And here's where it gets interesting, because his son was taken to the hospital here in Durham.
What, while he was here?
Yeah, that's one of the things he said. It wasn't mentioned by his wife, Mary Wakefield, when she wrote a big article about what it was like to be locked down in The Spectator, in which she didn't mention coming to Durham at all. And she didn't mention the son going to hospital. So the paramedics were called to his parents' farm down the road from here. And again, I want to stress this. I use the same supermarket as his mum and dad. You know, the Langley Park, Meadowfields, there's a Lidl and there's a Tesco Metro. They're basically halfway between where I am right now recording this video, where his parents live. It's less than 10 minutes down the road to their farm. Their farm isn't that big, and it is literally 5 minutes from Durham city centre.
But did you hear that, obviously, the Specsavers trip to Barnard Castle?
Well, I was going to come to that, because we haven't even got that far yet. This is how mad this story is. I mean, one of the things that Dominic Cummings said again and again in the garbage that he was spouting today, and we've really got to come on to the fact that there was no contrition, there was no apology for what he had done, you know. But we'll come on to that. We're just going on what he said. He came here with a deadly virus, brought it in. Imagine if it had been radioactive waste or a bioweapon in the car. Oh, a bioweapon in the car. Just drive up the motorway, 70 miles an hour, all the way. Don't stop. 5 hours.
Completely off his chops.
But that's it. I mean, it is a bioweapon. It's a thing that kills people. We can't stop. There's no cure for it. And I had some dingbat on Twitter, because there's a lot of dingbats on Twitter, all with like 49 followers and numbers in their name for some reason. And they're saying, it's not the most deadly virus in the world. And I'm like, why? And they're like, oh, because flu kills up to 700,000 people a year. And I'm like, well, COVID-19's killed over half that in 2 months. So can we extrapolate here?
And I love these people that they seem to wheel out that get huge traction on like Question Time and stuff. That guy that went, do you know how many people drowned a year? Oh no, do you know how many people
Yes.
died under whatever? 350. And he's like, there's more people that drowned a year. And I'm like, yes, but we've been on total global lockdown.
Yeah.
Like, what are you talking? How can you cannot say that this disease would have just been okay if we just had to let it run rampant through society?
That's something that an American will say to you. You say, well, there's 38,000 gun deaths a year in America. They'll say, yes, but there's more road traffic accidents. And you're like, well, cars aren't designed to kill people. Guns are. I don't see the link here. And these days, there's actually more gun deaths than there are traffic accidents in America. It's now the second biggest cause of death in America after heart disease.
And they were like what, some stupid.
Oh no, it's heart disease and cancer, I think.
Stupid comparisons like, but suicide kills, and I'm like, yeah, but you're not going to catch suicide from someone.
That's a very good point. Well, that's also something that the right wing have tried to use to say we've got to start the economy again because otherwise those people will commit suicide. And it is true that when you have an economic downturn, the suicide rate goes up, but about 6,000 people a year in the UK, unfortunately and tragically, take their own lives. Even if that number doubled, which is never done, even in the Great Depression, it didn't double in the space of a few months, it would be nowhere near the number of COVID-19 deaths. It would be 12,000, and there's over 36,000 COVID-19 deaths. There's 3 times more COVID-19. Can we deal with the virus, please? First and foremost, fuck the schools, fuck the economy, stop this thing from killing people, and then we can start reopening and getting on with our lives. But you've got so many people using these old Soviet techniques of whataboutism and say, do you think that's bad? What about this? What about that? And it's just so infuriating when you're dealing with something as serious as this deadly pandemic. And we've got so many people just going along with it and going, yeah, they're doing the best they can. Did someone say about Boris Johnson? He's doing his best. No, when a kid is running a 3-legged race in school and comes second, he did his best. This is the man who is in charge of the country, and if his best means 36,000 people are dead, 37,000 by now, at least.
Obviously, I think one of the biggest problems we're facing at the minute is that old phrase that one death's a tragedy and 1 million's a statistic.
Stalin said that.
Stalin, yeah. And we've now just become completely jaded to it, completely numb to, another 1,000 deaths today, no problem. Well. Like, put this in context of like the Manchester bombings, right? Or some like horrific incident where people, rightly so, were shocked to the core. Like I remember that night, that Manchester bombings being like feeling like a sort of British 9/11 and how sick it made you feel. Yeah, it's just like compare the deaths there to like what's happening every afternoon in the UK every day, but obviously not on Sundays because they don't add it up, but then Mondays again. And it's just like, and people are just like 8 o'clock. People. I've got a lot of international friends now, like living in New Zealand, Dubai, South America, and they're all going like across Europe, and they're all going like, so are you guys like really angry? Like, are you guys like raging with the government? I'm like, he's got them clapping for him like, to be totally honest, he's got them applauding. And what's very clear is that my friends that live abroad that haven't been subjected to the constant pro-Tory propaganda press, where it's repeating the slogan, we acted at the right time, we acted at the right time, we acted at the right time, we followed the science, we followed the science, we followed the science. People that haven't been subjected to that have this like clarity of vision of being able to look and evaluate and go, well, of course you're not doing a good job. You've got the highest death count outside of the USA and the entire planet. And
Yes.
what I also love how it very quickly splits straight down the middle into Brexiteers and Remainers, and that was the pro-lockdowners and the pro-Boris is doing a great jobbers, right?
Yeah.
And very strangely, for a side that was very much, you just have to believe, and it doesn't matter about the experts.
Yeah, and a certain obsession with borders, I seem to recall. They were obsessed with shutting borders and stopping foreigners from coming. And we became like literally one of the handful of countries in the world that didn't shut its borders. And we still haven't.
Let us get to that. But these two sides, for one that was didn't want to deal with figures and even experts, very quickly became experts in population density and aging populations and land density.
Japan.
Like, I have this conversation. I had one to do with this Craig kid, and the old arguing with a pigeon.
Yes, playing chess with a pigeon.
But there's no point because he'll shit all over and think he's won anyway. And like literally that's what he did. He started off going, and I put up like pretty non-arguable points. We've lost more doctors and nurses in a number of months than we did soldiers in the Iraq War.
Yes.
How can we seize them?
We've lost more doctors and nurses in a single week than all the people who have died of COVID-19 in New Zealand.
Right, yeah, exactly. We've got the highest death count in Europe, and there was another thing in there, I forget. There's so many I could have went on, and that's hyperbole, and we haven't got the highest death rate, blah blah blah. It's Belgium, but I'm like, no, you're skewing the data. You're trying to do per capita. We do have the highest death count, and this went on and on and on and on.
Per capita. Oh, but per capita, it's Belgium. And it's like...
Yeah. And then
they're booing the Prime Minister of Belgium. They're saying, oh, you're rubbish. Did you see there was video footage this week of all the medics? They turned around, they turned their back to the Prime Minister because they're pissed off because he's done a bad job.
Yeah, totally. And so these people have overnight become experts in excuses in population density and the average age of infection and they've got an older population. And for everyone, there was someone who was not just equally better performed, but like, for example, Japan, I think they've got a population over double ours with the highest
That's about double.
Yeah, highest population densities in the world, and they have had 600 deaths. Last time I checked, I think it'd be under 1,000. Right now, that is uncomparable to the UK. So that's the population density and population of the country out of the window. You can't mention it.
But they think that their Prime Minister, Abe, has done a really bad job. And it's like, he hasn't done as good a job as Jacinda Ardern in New Zealand, who's done just the best job in the world because only 21 people have died in the entire nation of New Zealand. People say, New Zealand's a really small country. Hang on, it wasn't a really small country on the other side of the world when we were going to get a great trade deal with it for Brexit. Now it's a really small country, we can just ignore it. It's like, okay, well, how come more people have died in County Durham, which has a substantially smaller population than New Zealand, than in New Zealand?
Yeah, there was no excuse. But like I say, so population size, Japan or Germany. Look at Germany.
Yeah, Germany, bigger population. 9 land borders.
Even, and this is the biggest thing no one's talking about, and it's the biggest factor. Time. We watched this slowly creep through Europe like a fucking fire. Sorry if you need to bleep that out. Like a slow fire, and we did nothing. Italian doctors, the WHO were all saying, act now. That I remember the WHO
Test.
word for word going, we are ringing the alarm bell loud and clear, was his exact wording. And we can't force countries to act. And he was on holiday, he did nothing. Even I knew that we had a lockdown. If all of these countries ended up having a cave in the end, I didn't think Spain and France did it, but they did. They caved. Yeah. And it's like, why not jump the gun now? I read a post from a statistician. Sorry, I'll finish here and then I'll continue. I read a post from a statistician or something that basically said, because it was increasing at such an exponential rate, one day a delay in lockdown was basically the 2 weeks in the come down pace, in like, you know, when it has to plateau and come down again. For every day we were losing, there was an additional 2 weeks it would take because it was going up like that. And he waited weeks. Yeah. And that's the issue. And no one wants to talk about time. They want to talk about, obesity. It's definitely the population density and land mass.
No. All of the countries that have done really, really badly so far, the UK, the US, and Brazil, under Bolsonaro, they've all been run by populist idiots who got where they were today because of their wealth and their connections rather than actually being able to do the freaking job. So, back to Cummings. We kind of got derailed there on a bit of a COVID-19 rant. That's fair enough. It's something to rant about, isn't it? If ever there was one. Anyway, so his child was taken into hospital, and it turned out that he didn't have COVID-19. His son was tested, apparently, even though Cummings said him and his wife weren't tested, which was really weird, because why weren't they tested? You know, especially him, he's in the government. Surely if you're working that closely with the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, they would have at least one testing kit available. So he brought this deadly virus to Durham. He then called up the ambulance service, medical workers in Durham, and they came to his parents' house where he was staying, you know, socially distanced from his parents. This is his words, okay? This is not, because he blamed the media a lot. The media is spinning these things. I'm just talking about what he said. And so those paramedics would have interacted with him and his wife who were infected with COVID-19. And then they would have gone back to the hospital where they work. Man, who knows? Infected some more people. Because they don't have adequate PPE. Because this government's shit and hasn't given them it. So that's his fourth crime, I think. And then this trip to Barnard Castle. I mean, come on. Come on, Paul. I mean, look, I drive through Barnard Castle on the way to Liverpool if I'm taking the A66, the northern route. And it's tiny. There's a little skinny bridge that's one way. You gotta stop at the stoplights and go over the little skinny bridge. It's a beautiful place. The river goes through the middle of town. So this is Dominic Cummings's excuse for taking a day trip on his wife's birthday to Barnard Castle.
I apologise before the fact I was looking up her birthday.
What is it? Is it
April 12th?
April 12th. Was that the day you went to Barnard Castle, or was it the 14th? Because obviously I want to be factual, but then again, you don't necessarily have to go precisely on someone's birthday to say that it's a birthday treat. Yeah, why don't we go to that lovely picturesque village of Barnard Castle? So they went there, but they didn't go for a day trip. They went because he was having problems seeing. And he thought, well, what I'll do is to test whether my eyes are okay for me to drive all the way to London, I will put my wife and, more importantly, my 4-year-old child in the car and drive on a 60-mile round trip to Barnard Castle and back.
It certainly doesn't add up.
Did he just make that up on the spot?
It was precisely on April 12th. It was literally on.
Hey, happy birthday, darling. Listen, my eyes aren't very good. Why don't I test it out by driving down the road for 30 miles? And then we can get out by the river just for 15 minutes, give my eyes a bit of a break from driving, and then we can drive back. We can stop on the way back in the woods because our child needed a wee. Didn't need a wee all the way up from London to Durham. 5 hours in a car with a 4-year-old. Any parents watching this, if they think that's realistic, well, who am I to say?
It's just like completely absurd considering the resources that someone in charge of 10 Downing Street has. And
he's a multi-millionaire.
Yeah,
his parents own a giant estate here.
And going back to the whole Boris Johnson thing, there is absolutely no way when you are, running the country, and for a 2-week period, even if it was just a spate of days in between.
Anyone seen Dominic?
Yeah. So you get a phone call. I need you to sign this document. You need to go and see such and such on the BBC. You need to go. So I can't. Why? I'm 200 miles up the road. I'm viewing a castle. Of course that would have been mentioned, and of course, but this, as we know by now, this is less about what actually happened and more about damage control. And obviously, the biggest priority about that press meeting wasn't to exonerate Dominic, but it was to draw a massive line between Dominic and Boris. So Boris was completely blameless. I didn't know, I wasn't aware, and I'm like scot-free here. And that's the fact. Yeah. Because if he knew, then that's an entirely different situation, isn't it? If Boris Johnson knew, then... I mean, obviously... Okay,
here's a question for you. The next thing he did is drive back to London. This is all come to him, so I'm not talking about any conjecture. I'm not talking about him doing a second trip or a third trip to Durham. I'm not talking about any of that. I'm just talking about what he said this afternoon in his press conference, which he was over half an hour late for, because he's a gobshite. I mean, that's a gobshite move. Tell you which other gobshites do that. Putin, Trump, and Johnson. They turn up for things late because it's a power trip for them, because they are very, very wealthy men with very, very small penises. But this is what he did. He made them wait in the Rose Garden for half an hour. And then finally, he came up with this fantastical story about having to come all the way up to Durham, across the entire nation, in a car with sickness in the car, this virus, this really lethal virus in the car. He brought it all the way up to here to Durham. Then he probably infected some paramedics. He definitely had contact with them. He drove his son back from the hospital, by the way, even though he didn't know later on whether he could drive or not. Okay. So then he took his son, who was getting over this thing of actually spending the night in an actual hospital because he was so ill, on a road trip to Barnard Castle to see if his sight worked okay for him to be able to get down to London. And then he went back down to London. Why did he take his wife and kid back down to London with him? Surely they would have been safer here in Durham, having seen out the worst ravages of COVID-19. But no, all three of them went back to London, where there's death threats against him from his neighbours or something. Isn't that one of the reasons why? Did they stop? Was there a 2-week gap? And suddenly everyone thought, oh, Dominic, he's all right. These death threats that weren't reported, by the way. The death threats that weren't... You just said that the death threats weren't reported. Alistair Campbell got onto that, yeah.
And it's this kind of scrutiny that we need, these unaddressed and then these underarm low ball questions that they get answered. Do you know the one guy that I loved that made us really sit up? It was the quite a Cockney speaking fella, the journalist in the Rose Garden, and he was the only one that ripped him to shreds. And he went, "Yeah, you might have not broken the letter of the legal terms." He says, "But you drove what was his
horse
expression?
And cart. A horse and cart.
I think it was the full horse and coach and horses straight through the middle of it, the sentiment." And I thought it was brilliant, because he was the only one that really gave him a tough time about anything.
He brought a deadly virus to a place that didn't have much of the deadly virus. And I don't think that Dominic Cummings brought all of it up here, but he didn't help. The lockdown was there to stop the virus from being unwittingly transported and spread all around the nation. And he knew he had it, well, he knew his wife had it, and he knew somehow that he would get it. That wasn't very well explained. And he got in his car and he drove up here. That should be a criminal offence. That is reckless endangerment. To have a child in the car is child abuse. The NSPCC should be all over this. Oh, I think I'm going blind, love. Should we jump in the car and drive really fast down the road? Down a fucking A road as well? You know, with cars coming the other way.
I think the main principle that everyone's absolutely incandescent about is, and again, to use a personal example, I don't know if I've already mentioned this in the show. So I've got a good friend whose dad has passed away of corona, and he had to sit in the hospital car park and sobbed. And this is a big man, covered in tattoos, 6'7", big man, sobbing his heart out because his dad had to pass alone in the hospital because he was told they couldn't be with him. And I think it's got the country irate because there's been numerous situations, not for obviously thousands given the numbers, where people are having to be buried but via live stream, or
Skype.
I mean, these things just get packaged up into nice sentences, but to try and physically get your emotional mind around saying goodbye to your grandparents for the last time over an iPad call. Like, that's something, that's pain that never would ever leave you. And for all this to be sort of brushed off and then for Dominic Cummings to be on a jolly up in Barnard Castle on his wife's birthday, and I think that's what everyone's annoyed at. Not so much the virus, which is obviously a threat, but it's the fact that people are suffering it. I've not seen my mother properly give her a hug in 3 months, 4 months, because she's...
Same here. My parents and my partner's parents are all in Liverpool. My dad suffers from vascular dementia. He's had it now for a good few years. He's not going to be around much longer. And this is time now that has been taken from me that I can't spend with him. He is too far gone to talk to me on the phone. I try and see him on the video chat, but it's hard to get him to look at the screen or interact or anything like that. I need to be there. I need to be there in person. And I was on Sheila Fogarty this afternoon talking about this, and I said, she said, well, would you isolate for 2 weeks and then go and see them? And I was like, well, you know, first of all, I'm in a situation where I can't really do that because we have children in the house who live in a split household. So I would have to isolate from them. So it wouldn't be as straightforward as it would be if they'd lived here permanently. But also, I mean, I don't want to risk it. I mean, you know, if I gave my mum a deadly disease just so I could see my dad, I couldn't live with myself. It's as simple as that. And for Dominic Cummings to not care that much about his son's well-being or his niece's well-being or his mum and dad's well-being or the paramedics' well-being, and just think, no, this is fine. And this is what I'm going to come to now. Because this is the most damning part. And you're right when you're talking about the fact that other people haven't gone to see their parents. They haven't been able to attend weddings, funerals. They haven't been able to see babies, you know, in the maternity hospital because they don't want to get the family COVID-19. And yet, this guy, he stands up in the Rose Garden of number 10 Downing Street, and there's just no apology. What do you have to say to the people of the North East who have been really good and done everything you've told them to? What do you have to say to them? Do you want to apologise? Nope. Not even an ounce of it. He said, I made some mistakes, but this wasn't one of them. What a shit.
That would be an admission of guilt. You know, that would be a chink in the armour for the first time. And the minute that they sort of open that can of worms up, obviously there's a lot of skeletons going on in their political cupboard in terms of what they've done. So that would just be the start of it.
But where do we go from here, Paul? Because these guys, Gove, Johnson, Cummings, Hancock, you know, they're running the place into the ground. Thousands of people are dying. This guy stands in the Rose Garden and basically says, I know that you people are fucking stupid. So I'm going to talk to you like you're a slow learner in kindergarten, right? I'm going to weave this fantastical tale about why I did something. And I know that you're so stupid that you'll believe it. And we have a good few million people in this country like, bravo, sir, well done. I like the cut of your jib. I'm like, are you fucking kidding me?
It's like James O'Brien and the whole doff your cap, and that's
took
what it is.
full
It's like, oh, well, yeah, Boris. And I don't know where that's come from.
We've always had deference in this country, mate. We've always had that idea that the working class look up to the middle class and the middle class look up to the upper class. But at the moment,
I very much think there was a vibe of mistrust with that, and we sort of got into our own. God, it seems so long ago, but like with like New Labour and stuff, it was very much like we are the working class and we're very much together. And I don't know, like I was laughing the other day because I think someone was discussing about the actual communists in the sort of early 20th century in the UK and stuff, and these workers' parties were like the bane of the upper ruling class that had been used to controlling the peasants for thousands of years, and like specifically things about socialism, and we want healthcare, we want houses to live in, we shouldn't all be sort of pushed into mining carts and sent into terrible conditions, and they've cracked it because instead of beating these parties and these sort of groups, they've just conned the working class into hating them and thinking that in fact they're the enemy and the ruling class. Like Jacob Rees-Mogg is a caricature comic book. Like he looks like he should be strapping like some damsel to a railway track somewhere, and people look at him and go, "Working class hero, please can I vote for you?"
But this thing that the Remain marchers were desperately middle class, middle-aged, middle class, Middle England. That was who went to those marches, pretty much. You didn't see many people coming from the rougher areas of town. There wasn't a lot of BAME representation in the Remain movement, which got mentioned a lot. And also,
I doubt there was many BAME in Brexit either.
Yeah, that's true. But it would have been more. It would have been nice to have a bit more feeling like it was a representative of the entire nation rather than a representation of a segment of the population. But it does very much seem, and I know that the class divisions have become blurred over the years. But I think you're absolutely right. It's like you got the middle class who, some of them are horrible. Some of them are racist, so they'll all be UKIP and Brexity. But a lot of them are like, they just want to get on with their lives pretty much. And you got a lot of people who we would in the past regard as working class. And they have been hoodwinked left, right and centre by the posh boys, by these upper class toffs who are all privately educated. Cummings privately educated, Gove privately educated, horrible Johnson fella privately educated. I mean, you just reel them off. LBC has 17 DJs or hosts on LBC radio. Do you know how many of them went to private school?
Most of them. I know James O'Brien has
11 of the 17. 11 went to private school. But that's supposed to be 7% of the population. And yet, these toffs who, born into wealth, never had a proper job as people would normally describe it. And before anyone puts in the comments, oh, but Graham, you travel around the world and write books about it, you've never had a proper job. I used to be employed as a cleaner in Fab Cafe in Manchester, cleaning the fucking toilets, okay? So that's not a proper job. I don't know what it is. I've also worked in offices. I don't know what proper jobs are these days. I've never worked down a mine, but I have worked in a garage because my dad had a garage when I was growing up and I used to fix cars in the garage. I guess that's a proper job to certain people. I don't know. I've never worked in a bank. I don't know how this works. But I guarantee that Alexander de Piffle Boris Johnson has never, ever got his hands dirty in doing anything. Do you know what I mean? What do you do, Boris? Oh, I'll make boxes and I make them into buses.
His hands are dirty at the moment, like, to say the least.
Anyway, back to Cummings. So, no contrition, no apology. Paul, what do you think is going to happen next?
Again, it's like, even with the past 4 or 5 years, how do you predict it? I think, unfortunately, it's going to be status quo. I think this is going to continue, and the only sort of disruptive factor in this whole conveyor belt of like having to watch, these people just run roughshod over the entire country, and the only disruptive factor is going to be Keir Starmer if he pulls his finger out and does something, and I think that could be the change that we need. But at the moment, it looks like we've got a government that is shameless, beyond accountability, beyond apology. Is more bothered about Boris Johnson was quoted to say that I wouldn't get rid of one of my top advisors and aides. Now, he was happy to get rid of the scientific advisor that's there to save lives, but he's not happy to get rid of the political advisor that's there to make slogans and fool people. Yeah. Now, if that doesn't speak to his priorities, then I don't know what is. He's more concerned with winning elections, keeping the polls up, than actually saving people's lives. Like, we're in the realms of absurdity when we're talking about deaths in groups of 10,000s. There are 10,000 unaccountable deaths in care homes.
And people are falling over themselves to defend this monster. This guy who got Boris Johnson to lie to the Queen. This guy who got Boris Johnson to commit treason, as far as I'm concerned. This guy who was held in contempt of Parliament. And I don't think that's ever been revoked. I think he's still in contempt of Parliament for not turning up to a select committee that wanted to ask him questions. This guy who has made sure that the Russia report into Russian interference in our electoral system has never come to light. A guy who spent a lot of time in Russia in the 1990s. Now, what happened in the 1990s in Russia? Oh, a lot of oligarchs made a shitload of money very, very quickly. And then one day, Vladimir Putin came into power in the year 2000. And the first thing he did, he started throwing these oligarchs in jail. And they didn't like this. And the ones that were left, he said, listen, you give me half your money and I won't throw you in jail. And they went, okay, here's the money. That's why Putin is one of the wealthiest men in the world, unofficially. The money's all spread out. We saw this with the Panama Papers. He's got a mate who plays the cello or something, and he's like a multi-billionaire. And it's like, what? You made that much money playing the fucking cello? Are you kidding me? But this is the guy, Dominic Cummings, very good friend of Vladimir Putin, a guy who has run roughshod through the British political system for the last God knows how long, and basically. I'm sick of it, but I can't see a way out of it, Paul. I can't see, because you say, well, Keir Starmer, he can't do shit for another bloody 4 years now, because we're not going to have an election for another 4 years, and the Tories have got an 80-seat majority.
You know what I thought? I thought, imagine if Labour hadn't been tricked and goaded into that snap general election in December. It
wasn't Labour, mate, it was Corbyn. Corbyn and Swinson. Bloody idiots.
This government had it been dragged, and obviously they would have performed in an equally terrible way.
Yeah, but it would have been the end of them. It would have been the end of them. The opinion polls are diving for Boris Johnson at the moment.
This huge majority. And obviously they can now just run roughshod with political advisors that are completely unelected.
Yeah.
That we can't do anything about.
A week is a long time in politics. 4 years is an eternity, and they can cause so much chaos and destruction. This is what Dominic Cummings wants. He wants to cause a civil war. That's what he's into. He's into eugenics. He's into shaking things up and causing disruption. And he's an absolute sociopath. He doesn't function like a normal human being. He's got no empathy. You saw today, he couldn't show a shred of emotion towards the people who have missed their parents' funerals and not been there for the birth of their grandchildren because of this lockdown that he doesn't care about because he doesn't have to because he's rich and powerful. Ha ha ha, peasants.
It's scary times, mate, but we're used to it by now.
I'm in a state of sort of nervous exhaustion at the moment because I'm just so sick of all this. And one of the things that I mentioned to my partner the other day was, when I was younger, I never felt this hopeless. I never felt this powerless, and it's horrible. And I guess as a white, middle-aged, middle-class man, I'm not used to it. Other people, women, people from ethnic minorities, refugees, socially disadvantaged, they've felt like this all their lives. I haven't, and it's horrible. And I've got enough empathy to know that it would be horrible, but now it's finally happening to me, and I don't know, Paul. It's just that feeling that that this horrible thing is happening, and there's literally nothing you can do about it. It's like you're watching a movie.
Completely helpless. I think that's how a lot of people's felt with this thing where people, the public have been writing MPs and demanding, it's not even up for debate. He should be resigning, just as the medical advisor did, just as the Scottish advisor did. It's it just shows that we've got no real control over them, because they'll just do anything they want. And what can we do?
Well, what we can do is, if you live in Durham, like I do, you can write to the constabulary here about Dominic Cummings' admissions that he made, that he came up here with a known deadly disease. He endangered the safety and welfare of his son in the process of doing that, and also that he took a day trip to Barnard Castle when his eyesight was not up to scratch, which I think is also a crime. So if anyone wants to write to the police here and let them know that they should be investigating this, I think they are already cracking on with that. Maybe he might get arrested for his actual crimes that he's actually committed and confessed to today in the Rose Garden of number 10 Downing Street.
Shame to say you're not being by the rules and you're in a pub.
Yeah, I'm in a virtual pub. Well, it depends which camera I decide to use, because I'll probably use the footage from my actual camera, which will show my lovely living room here.
Okay, sorry.
Prize to the first person who can guess what this poster is behind me that you can see a little bit of. Paul Somerville, thank you for joining me.
Thank you very much for having me.
And I will speak to you again soon, and hopefully we'll have some more fun things to talk about. Who knows?
Thanks, Graham. Bye.
All right. Cheers, Paul. Ta-da.